Good morning, everybody. It's Eric. July 28th, Tuesday, about 2 hours before the market's going to close. I'm going to definitely keep this one brief, but I just wanted to verbalize this instead of writing it. And this is an update on Bitcoin for those of you that are interested in this area. Excuse me. And obviously, I've been recommending Bitcoin to Gold Investment Letter subscribers since the first alert that we put out was at $450 per Bitcoin in 2016. It was in either April or May of 2016. That was also around the time when I made my first purchase of Bitcoin. And it was just like play money, it wasn't a lot. So I didn't think very many people took me seriously then, and I wasn't really taking it that seriously either. Since that time, I've spent hundreds of hours diving into crypto, into Bitcoin, into the community, into research, into other tokens, other technologies, the entire ecosystem of crypto and blockchain. And I'm convinced that, this is the future. And when somebody says that I'm not interested in Bitcoin, blockchain, I liken it to like somebody making the same comment about the internet in the year 2000. I'm just not really interested. Now, investing in it is one thing, and I'm not even really talking about that with this point. I'm talking about how much that this digital revolution is going to affect our daily lives in ways that we can't even imagine. And so the investment side is one thing, the reality is another. So like even with the internet bubble, which I went through as a young broker, we had this huge, bubble in NASDAQ stocks and then a crash. And I always say, the mistake that I made at that time, being young and just trying to hustle to make quick bucks and trade hot stocks and things like that, is that if I would have taken a little bit more of a wise view and a long view, underneath that up and down was this trend that to this day is still continuing because of international adoption of internet usage and e-commerce and even email. That was the first killer app for the internet. And if I would have just paid attention to what was going on underneath in terms of the mechanics of why people started to use the internet and the different tools that became available to not only individuals, but also to business owners. I always say, like, the first person, even if you just sold vacuum cleaners, if you caught on early to Google AdWords, you would be the biggest vacuum distributor and salesperson on planet Earth, and you would be very rich because it applies to any business, and so like this stuff is going to permeate major parts of our lives and our culture. And besides getting too much more into that, I just want to talk about Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, there was a ceiling on Bitcoin recently that it had failed to get through 3 times. And that was in this 10,000 to 10,500-600 area that it had hit, was major resistance, fell back down. A couple times it fell down fairly modestly, 15, 20%. And then in March, it got cut in half in a day, which was pretty crazy. But yesterday, we broke that resistance. And all I can tell you is based on my experience in the capital markets. I'm a gold and silver, quote unquote, guy, but my background is more, except in the last decade or so, a little bit more than a decade, but my background is mostly in tech investing, venture capital. I'm still an angel investor in a lot of fintech and technology companies, blockchain companies. I'm very active in that stuff. I don't talk about it a lot here, but I'm interested in the future, and I'm interested in, in things that you get to learn about really early by being plugged into the VC community. And so it's very, very fascinating to me. And I'll make bets in that area, feeling like, the odds of certain investments are very, very big long shots to make money. But, I've had some big winners as well. And I learn on the way. But the thing with Bitcoin is that we're dealing with a situation in the financial landscape of the globe that is unprecedented. We all know this. Like, we know that the debt is untenable and unsustainable for the United States and really for almost every nation on the planet. I mean, there are some that have still got fiscal responsibility, that have not borrowed too much. But if you look at the major hubs with central banking systems and groups that are extremely active in Europe, in Japan, in China, in the US, in a lot of these major nations, we have completely gone off the reservation in terms of how much debt that we carry and the lack of ability to ever pay it back. And the only real hope that we are going to pay it back, there's two ways to pay it back at this point. You look at the 25, 27 trillion, which it'll be very soon, in on the books unfunded or on the books liabilities for the United States. When you start to talk about the unfunded liabilities for the future, but these are real things. You're talking about Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. I mean, people count on this stuff, but luckily I grew up at a time in the way that I view the world. I was like, I'm not going to rely on any of that stuff because it's just going to be gone. It's not going to be here, but they still have to do something about that. But if you look at the obligations that are there for that type of stuff, it's closer to $100 trillion. And even if you just use the 25 trillion, okay, come on. Does anybody know what $25 trillion really looks like? It's like you're already talking about monopoly money. And the two ways that it's going to get paid back or dealt with is through massive debasement of our currency and other currencies around the world, which is what is happening. But you'd have to see that happen at a very, very accelerated rate, which means that you pay back. Say you owe $1 million in a timeline. You borrowed $1 million. It's got $1 million worth of spending power. Years go by, you can't pay it back, and you just say, like, look, we're going to print a bunch of money so that we're paying back the $1 million, but the purchasing power is actually really worth 300,000 in that day's dollars because of how much you've created. So you've got that ability, right? Which is pretty much where everybody is going in the direction that folks are going. But it's such a big problem that what is really going to happen for sure, the timing of which is really hard to figure out. I mean, we've seen that the system can continue to kick the can down the road for much, much longer than a lot of us thought or anticipate. But the other thing is a reset. It's sort of like this debt jubilee slash global reset. We've heard people in high places talk about this. I think that a lot of these folks in positions of power know that it's coming. They know there's no other way to do it. I don't know how it's going to look. I'm not necessarily one of these gold people that says we need to go back to a gold standard. I'm actually in the middle of studying a lot of history around the gold standard when we had it and the pluses and minuses around that. A lot of it was very good. It has some limitations, but at least it kept checks and balances in place with not allowing these nations to just borrow, indiscriminately. Because we all have to pay for this. There's a price to pay for this stuff. And that's why when you get these politicians that talk about, we need to give more money here, we need to give more money there, we need, where does it come from? It's like they just make it out of thin air. But also it's a debt that society pays. When you dilute the value of what we have for currency, we need more of that currency to pay for the same amount of goods. And so it's a hidden tax. It's a hidden tax of inflation. But anyway, we're dealing with a situation. And then part of the reason why I think we're seeing such a rush and move into gold is because We've got these massive deficits. We have extremely low interest rates that look like they're even going lower because the governments are unable to raise the rates or it would blow up the system. I mean, look what they tried to do, what was it, 18 months ago? And the market got destroyed when they just tried to raise rates a modest amount and reel back in the balance sheet at the Fed. There's no way out. And so, and everything's entwined too, in terms of like, you have your money in the banks and we have these centralized places that, monitor everything that we have and can control everything that we have. And we might even have a situation where, whether it's liberals coming into office and saying there's a wealth tax, or it's just that the world says we're broke and we're going to do this reset. So basically we're taking half of your money and you don't get access to it anymore. I mean, any of these things are actually possible. And the beauty of Bitcoin is that it is out of the system. Unless you have it sitting on an exchange that can end up being confiscated, which is possible. But if you really truly want to have Bitcoin on, say, something like a USB that is offline, stored in a safe that is not on Wi-Fi, and if you want access to it, you plug it into Wi-Fi. You can carry millions and millions of dollars across a border in a little, disk drive. And there's no centralization. It's completely decentralized. People talk about the government is going to shut it down. I ask you this: how the hell are they going to shut down a decentralized system? I'm waiting. You just don't understand how Bitcoin works. Can they slow it down by banning Coinbase and these other exchanges and saying you can't, use these on-ramps from fiat? Absolutely. And that would certainly hurt the price of Bitcoin as well. But you can't stop it. And there's still going to always be a very big group of people, especially if something like that did happen, that would be even more concerned about getting their hands on Bitcoin. And people that have the Bitcoin off of the grid, so to speak, could trade that for God knows what, for other people that want that wealth off the system. Similar with gold and silver, and having that stored outside. Yeah, if the government can confiscate, let's just say that they could, which they can't, actual Bitcoin, where are they going to go to take, say, my Bitcoin or your Bitcoin, if it's not sitting on an exchange and we have a record of it on the blockchain, and I've got my private keys, my public keys, and it's sitting somewhere in a wallet that they don't know where that wallet is, or even if they did, how are they going to take it? They don't have the keys. You don't know how it works. It was designed for this world that we're in. It was designed after the 08-09 crash. And some very smart people or very smart person said, we've got to do something so that if this happens again, the people have the ability to transact directly without any third parties and can actually distribute value in a digital world. So there's nothing better in terms of what's going on in this world for tailwinds for gold, for tailwinds for Bitcoin. And whether you believe in Bitcoin, there's a lot of people that compare it to gold. There's people that fight it's better than gold, it's not gold. Listen, they complement each other. And gold is my safe haven of money. But Bitcoin is going to go so much higher because there's such a limited amount and adoption continues to grow. And the way that the world is, it is going to become more and more appealing to so many more people. And that's what you have to look at, even if I don't buy into something completely, but I can see how the world's going to buy into it, I'll still invest in it and exploit the fact that I can see the writing on the wall. There's a lot of proponents in the gold world that continue to poo-poo Bitcoin. And I just want to let you know, even if you were trading soybeans or euros or Apple or whatever it is, when you see a technical breakout like we've just seen with Bitcoin, you want to be long. It's going higher. And I think it's going a lot higher. And I've always said this as well, is that with the Bitcoin quote unquote experiment, I mean, the fact that it's gone through major hits from the Mt. Gox hack early on, which was like one of the main, places to store Bitcoin that was just hacked. People lost a lot of that money. You've had the 50% crash, recently in March. You've had all kinds of things that have happened, and it's still here after 10 years. That tells you something, and it's very, very resilient through these times. And I believe that that is evidence that it is here to stay for at least some period of time. I think it's not going to go away. This digitization of assets is not only not going to go away, it's going to accelerate massively. Who's going to want to hold cash with COVID? They're going to tell you you're going to get sick. No more cash. What is going to end up being the only way to have anything that can't be completely monitored by the government? I mean, not that I care that much, but I don't want everything that I own susceptible to the government making some determination that my money's their money. So anyway, Bitcoin is a tremendous place to have some capital. And the result, as I've said, will be binary. It'll be a binary outcome. It will fail and you'll lose your money, or it's going to like $500,000 or $1 million of Bitcoin. That's a lot of upside. So say I'm wrong and it only goes to 250,000. It's 25x. I think it could probably happen in the next 3 or 4 years. It tends to have these 4-year cycles that end up running, and we just had the halving, and there's so many things going for Bitcoin right now. And I just think the train is about to leave the station. And so, it's just like with a lot of my friends on Facebook and even subscribers. Buy gold, 1,100, 1,200, 1,300, sitting there for years. Buy gold, 1,400, buy gold. But it's not moving. It hasn't done anything. It's gone down for years. And then now I'm starting to get the calls. And my response to people is, I made posts to you guys that if you're not going to buy any of it now, don't contact me when it's 2,000. Because I just tell you that you're not paying attention, and you're part of the sheep. So should you buy it now after it's already gone up 60% in 2 years? I'm not going to tell you that. I told you to buy it when it was cheaper. And I mean, yeah, I told you to buy Bitcoin at 450, but I think it's still a strong buy here. I'm not going to keep recommending Bitcoin though. When it goes over 15, 20,000, you better already be positioned, or don't contact me. Should I still buy Bitcoin? Don't do it. Because I'm going to say, if you read my stuff, you heard my videos for a long time, for years, months and years, and every time it was way down. And after that crack that we saw where it bottomed in late 2018 at 3,200, and then after the crash in March where I said to buy it, I mean, there's been a lot of cases where I've said to load up. I've petitioned people and said, I beg of you, if you don't understand it, but you trust me, when Bitcoin was 5,000, 6,000, just buy your kids one. Buy each of your kids a Bitcoin and forget about it, and see if this can pay for their college education. If you lose $5 or $6 grand per child, I'm sure you're not going to be devastated. And that's the risk, like it's not all just about pumping it up and all the upside. It's a high risk early asset, and if everybody was on board with something, you're never going to get the biggest returns and the best buys when everybody's agreeing on something. If you want everybody agreeing on something, go buy the FANG stocks. And I'm kind of looking forward to the day when everybody who's the long to the teeth in the FANG stocks get hit in the side of the head with a 2x4. Because if you're in the most crowded trade in history, and that makes you feel comfortable, you just don't know what you're doing. And it's very, very common right now. But in any event, I've really tried to convince people close to me to buy Bitcoin and at least get some on the books. I'm doing that with you right now. I think you should have some, even if it's somewhat modest. But here's the thing, though. If you really want my opinion, you should have a lot of money in Bitcoin. A lot. If you want to get rich or you want to get richer, I have over 20% of my net worth. It might be a little less than 20 because of how much my other assets in gold and silver have gone up, but I have been adding more to my crypto too. 20% of my entire net worth is in crypto. So, Bitcoin goes to a couple 100,000, I'm going to make a lot of money, and if it goes to zero, first of all, it's not because I've done my homework and it might go down a lot temporarily and it's very volatile, but this stuff is here to stay, guys. And, if you are over the age of 60, maybe even 50, it's harder for you to really kind of like wrap your head around why that this is such, an attractive thing to people. But if you're under that age, you get it. And, I'm in that Gen X area, 45 years old. I'm kind of like in between, but I stay on top of technology. But anybody under the age of 30, crypto's money. And I'm sorry to say it, but, those of you that are later on in age, like the gold bugs, the baby boomers that have a certain way of thinking, your days are not going to be here forever. And the new generation is going to adopt a different way of life as well as currency and money and stores of value. And this stuff is already happening. And not only that, last thing I'll say, Paul Tudor Jones, Peter Thiel, Bill Miller, Raoul Pal. I mean, you've got major players that have been some of the best hedge fund, macro, value fund investors for the last decades. People that we, many of you know and respect are deep in Bitcoin. And so it's not like we don't have any social proof about this. We do. And I think some of the smartest guys on the planet are very long Bitcoin, and many of them just don't talk about it yet because they're still buying it or they're not on record. But you're going to start to hear Dalio. You're going to hear, Bridgewater. We have a big position in Bitcoin. You're going to hear a lot more of this as we go forward and as the adoption moves forward. And yeah, so this breakout yesterday was big. If you've been dragging your feet, I think you may want to really take a serious look at this right now. Could it come back again? Yeah, but I think it's about to go. And I think it's about to really go. And when crypto goes, you're going to be like, holy shit, I missed it.